This is True News, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help us God. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis wants a grand jury to investigate pharmaceutical companies that rush to produce COVID-19 vaccines. Meanwhile, Moderna is rushing to release a mRNA vaccine to stop skin cancer. Let's start today with this report from the Tampa Bay Times. DeSantis requests grand jury probe on COVID-19 vaccines. What is going on, Doc?
Well, the governor has gathered together some key officials in the state and has decided that he's going to make a full frontal assault on the so-called COVID vaccine industry that's been out there. We have this quote from the Tampa Bay Times. Governor Ron DeSantis today said he asked the Florida Supreme Court to impanel a statewide grand jury to investigate any and all wrongdoing in Florida with respect to COVID-19 vaccines. Now, Mr. DeSantis said he expects the grand jury will bring legal accountability for those who committed misconduct. The governor has previously raised concerns about side effects from mRNA COVID vaccines and has railed against vaccination requirements by some employers. So, Rick, this is the first shot over the bow.
It is. It's a major development. I want to jump down, for our guys in the control room, jump down to number 7. I want to put on the screen the actual petition. This is what the governor submitted to the Florida Supreme Court today. He held a 90-minute press conference and then announced this request, this petition. And it says, petitioner Ron DeSantis, governor of the state of Florida, respectfully petitions this court under section 905.33 Florida statutes for an order to impanel a statewide grand jury. And it goes on to say, this is quoting the state law, this is under section 2, whenever the governor, for good and sufficient reason, deems it to be in the public interest to impanel a statewide grand jury, she or he may petition in writing to the Supreme Court for an order impaneling a statewide grand jury. The Supreme Court may order the impaneling of a statewide grand jury in accordance with the petition for a term of 12 calendar months.
And that's exactly what the governor is requesting right now. And so,
well, Doc, what's important here is this isn't a local grand jury. This is not a city attorney or a county prosecutor going to a county grand jury. This is the governor of one of the most populous states in America going to the Supreme Court of the state.
Yes.
This is a big development. If the Florida Supreme Court grants the petition, you have a statewide grand jury impaneled by the Supreme Court of the state, called into action by the governor.
Right.
To investigate the pharmaceutical companies and other government officials who were involved in rushing the development and distribution of the fake vaccines.
And when we talk about a statewide grand jury, the petition that the governor submitted to the Supreme Court today requested that that this grand jury be given the authority to use all law enforcement within the state of Florida, not just at the state level, but even at the local level, like the sheriff's office or police departments, whatever it might be, to be involved in this or for any requests that need to be made. So this isn't just a general blanket, yeah, we're going to call up some witnesses here and everything. No, this is a full frontal investigation, if you will, against the pharmaceutical industry. And so it won't be pretty.
They're going to be going county by county, city by city, looking at unusual deaths and side effects in the state of Florida caused by the vaccines. And so they will be able to, the grand jury will be able to subpoena city and county and state health agency executives.
Well, and even in this petition, it says they would call up federal officials that are active in the state of Florida, too. For instance, representatives of the CDC. This is number 3 for control here. He has also said the state will create a public health integrity committee to offer critical assessment of recommendations and policies from the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Food and Drug Administration, and other organizations. And that committee is expected to include several national health figures who have been outspoken against the use of lockdown policies and the need for COVID-19 vaccines. Rick, when I was talking with you earlier about this particular development today by the Florida governor, this is not just a war on the pharmaceutical industry, but also a war on the federal government too, in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think Governor DeSantis would describe it as a war. He's going to say, no, this is a legal, court-ordered investigation. But you only impanel a grand jury when you have reason to believe that a crime was committed.
Right.
And it talks about potential criminal acts in the state of Florida. That's what caught my attention. It mentions the investigation of potential criminal behavior in the state of Florida by pharmaceutical companies and government officials. So
even at the federal level.
Even at the federal level. And one paragraph in here says, I'm reading from the governor's petition to the Supreme Court. Only months ago, a Pfizer executive confirmed at a hearing in front of the European Parliament that the company did not test its COVID-19 vaccines before they entered the market to determine whether they prevented the transmission of COVID-19. You said something to me, Doc, a few minutes earlier before we started today's TruNews. You said, Rick, most of the articles that the governor's petition cites to the Supreme Court, had the governor tweeted these articles months ago, he would have been deplatformed.
Yes. Even though they're legitimate articles and legitimate sources, the fact that he would even, publish them on his own would get him deplatformed. Something's
changed.
Yes.
The weather, the political weather has changed. The election, the November election, did not have the results that a lot of people thought it would have, but there's a different mindset in the country post-November than it was before the November elections. I can feel it. I can sense it. It's different. One of the things that's different is in the Republican presidential race for 2024. We're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes.
Right.
You can feel the change that's taken place in less than 2 months. The other thing that's happened since November is Elon Musk taking control of Twitter. And he is dumping massive amounts of internal Twitter files, and he's releasing them to the public. And he's showing that the company he purchased was involved in interfering in the presidential election. And that the company that he purchased most likely committed acts of treason.
It's just...
Yeah, think of what we're saying. And he spent $44 billion to buy this company. What do you do once you have that kind of evidence? Because he just continues to release more evidence. Last night he released the graduate thesis of the guy he fired, Twitter's former chief censor,
Yoel
Roth, who is a gay activist, and he released his thesis, which Elon Musk said, "Hey, this guy that I fired, he was advocating for children to have access to sexual dating apps for gay men."
Right. And Musk also said last night, too, that there's a safety committee, a safety and security committee that had met on a regular basis. Never in all the times that they met did they ever discuss child exploitation on Twitter. Right. And so basically, Elon Musk said, if you're not fighting it, you're facilitating it. So
that's right. Well, I'm going to get back to the DeSantis story, because this is big. Folks, we've waited a long time for something like this to happen. All of us that that warned against the fake vaccines, and they are fake vaccines. They're not vaccines. They should not be called vaccines. That in itself, Doc,
Yes.
is, if it was any other product, they would have been charged with deceptive advertising practices.
And that's what, in the petition.
Does he mention that?
Yes, he says that specifically, that he feels like the pharmaceutical companies have used deceptive marketing practices within the state of Florida. Ooh. And so, yeah, that's in it. I read the whole thing.
Well, Doc, you know, there could be the state attorney general. Out of this grand jury investigation, the state attorney general could file criminal charges against pharmaceutical executives.
And that is mentioned in here too, that in the course of impaneling a grand jury or in the investigation that follows, that the attorney general or other law enforcement agencies could file charges against those, even if it wasn't specifically related to a vaccine cover-up within the state of Florida.
Because this investigation, it will produce documents.
Yes.
And Moderna and Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer will have to give their internal documents to the grand jury.
Right.
Again, this is a statewide criminal grand jury. It's going to be impaneled by the Supreme Court of the state. This is not something that they can just ignore it and say, we're not going to cooperate. This is a serious development for the pharmaceutical industry today. I want to go into this article. So the governor made this announcement today at the end of a 90-minute roundtable with Florida's Surgeon General. And he focused on the alleged harms of the vaccine. Of course, the article says the majority of public health experts say the vaccines are safe and serious side effects are extremely rare.
Well, it used to be there were no side effects, remember?
That's right.
None. Then they shifted a little bit. And once again, Governor DeSantis brought that out in his petition today, too. Now, included in the roundtable discussion, which streamed live from a West Palm Beach studio, was Stanford professor Jay Bhattacharya, who is popular in conservative circles for critiquing COVID-19 vaccine mandates and for authoring the Great Barrington Declaration, which denounced lockdown policies. Also included were Tracy Haig, a California epidemiologist who's done COVID-19 vaccine research with the Florida Department of Health, and Joseph Freeman, an emergency room doctor in Louisiana, who has said there's no clear benefit for the COVID vaccines for children. Governor DeSantis said all three, among others on the panel, will be part of this new committee. And so they are going to be making a full court press, at least here within the state of Florida, to investigate COVID-19 vaccines. And we use vaccines in the sense that, you know, that they've been using it.
So, Doc, the state law says that the Supreme Court, when they impanel grand jury, the term of the grand jury is 12 months.
Right.
So if the Supreme Court acts on this petition this month, and let's say the grand jury meets in January of 23, the grand jury is going to be active throughout the entire year of 2023, meaning its report will be issued to the Supreme Court in early 2024.
Right.
Just as the presidential election campaign is starting.
Let's keep that in mind on the timeline here, because that's
Ron
going to be
DeSantis is going to be riding a wave on this investigation. Now, while Mr. DeSantis is starting a statewide investigation of the pharmaceutical companies over their messenger RNA vaccines, which are not vaccines, they are gene operating systems that are downloaded into human beings. Moderna is excited to announce that they are rushing forward to develop a mRNA cancer vaccine. This is according to today's Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, coming out of this article here, Rick, it's read that a customized Moderna vaccine combined with a Merck & Company cancer drug helped ward off the recurrence of the skin cancer melanoma after surgery in patients in a mid-stage clinical trial, the company said. Now, the company said on Tuesday that the combination of Moderna's personalized cancer vaccine, once again, it's an operating system, not a vaccine, and Merck's Keytruda cancer immunotherapy reduced patients' risk of relapse or death by about 44% versus Keytruda alone in the 150 volunteer study. So, Rick, as we start off this particular story here, once again, we have to discern or translate some of the words in the article because, once again, it's not a vaccine. It is an operating system, okay? But to come along and say this is a cancer vaccine, one of the big projects for the Biden administration has been the Moonshot Project, which is to find a cure for cancer by 2024. And so this fits right in with some of those policies and some of those plans moving forward. But how can we trust Moderna and Merck in this situation when they've changed the script on us over the past 2 years as it relates to COVID?
Doc, as we've pointed out many times in the past 2 years, the introduction of messenger RNA operating systems, and I'm just reluctant to call them vaccines. They're not vaccines. I'm not anti-vaccine unless the vaccine was made with aborted baby cells.
Technically, we're anti-genetic operating systems.
Yes, yes, let's be correct. I am anti-genetic operating systems. So the introduction of the messenger RNA operating system at the onset of the fake, it wasn't a fake pandemic, it was a man-made pandemic, all right? It changed forever the vaccine industry.
Yes.
Forever. You will never again go back to ordinary vaccines as we have known for the past 100 years.
They wanted that.
Yes. Was it the president of Johnson & Johnson, maybe the European president of Johnson & Johnson, that last year speaking at a medical conference?
It was a Bayer executive.
It was a Bayer. It was
Yes.
Bayer. And he said, talking about the COVID pandemic, he said, 2 years before this pandemic, we would have never been able to persuade the public to allow us to inject a mRNA
Gene therapy
into their system. But because of the pandemic, the public has accepted it.
Right. The president of Bayer's Pharmaceuticals Division told experts during a globalist health conference that the mRNA COVID shots are indeed cell and gene therapy, and said exactly what Rick said. And said 2 years ago, there was no way we could have introduced gene therapy as a solution to people, but now we can.
That's right. And so that's why this story that we're looking at today with Moderna saying, we're developing a skin cancer vaccine. Well, doesn't everybody want to be free of skin cancer? I mean, especially here in Florida with all the sunshine we get here.
I'm definitely anti-cancer.
Yeah, we're anti-cancer. So it's going to be an easy sell for them.
Yes.
Because they're going to promise people, if you get this vaccination, you'll never get skin cancer. But it is it's the second operating system they're going to be injecting into your body. Layer after layer after layer of genetic operating systems.
And if we're to look at the recent past here, just 2 years ago, they were telling us if you took the COVID quote vaccine operating system, you won't get COVID. They said that. Mm-hmm. People like the CEO of Merck and other. I mean, not
Joe
Merck,
Biden.
but
Joe Biden
Moderna.
promised the American people, if you're vaccinated, you will not get infected.
The head of the CDC did too. He said if you take the vaccine, you won't get COVID.
And when we pointed out that they were lying, we were accused of medical disinformation.
Right.
And yet we know they lied. And what this grand jury is going to point out is they lied. So Moderna is rushing to introduce the next messenger RNA vaccine. Doc, I don't know how this is scientifically, I don't know how this is working, but if you received the COVID mRNA operating system, and then the next year you get the cancer mRNA vaccine, and the year after that you get another messenger RNA vaccine for another disease, and so forth. You know, by the 10th one,
how much has changed at that
how much
point?
has changed in your body? Because this is like a Microsoft, their operating system.
Right.
Basically, what programmers have told me is whatever new Microsoft operating system is released to the public, it's just another layer built on the first one that they introduced.
So if people can remember, you know, back when you had Windows 95.
Yeah.
Okay. In 1995, Windows 95 was, you know, bread and butter. I mean, it worked great. Everybody loved it. And then you had Windows 97, and then Windows 2000. And it was constantly upgraded.
But they didn't get rid of it. They
No.
just built on top of it.
That's right.
See, this is what I'm asking about these messenger RNA vaccines. If you have 5 to 10 of them, how many layers have they put into your genetic system? And when do you stop being a human being?
And that's a great question, Rick, because what these operating systems do, they're gene therapy. They're changing your genes.
And when you are no longer a human being, at what point does a court declare you are not entitled to human rights? Because you forfeited your rights.
Right, by volunteering to have your genes manipulated.
Yes. And is there some fine print when people are being vaccinated? Literally fine print that they are surrendering their rights to be a human being.
Well, we know that the pharmaceutical companies won't be held responsible because they've been given basically amnesty from being sued and everything. It goes
Always
on,
be repealed.
Right. It goes on in this article to say if the combination of these two therapies, that they call them, prove successful in further testing, the results could broaden the applications for Moderna's messenger RNA platform beyond the COVID vaccine that was the first use for the gene-based technology. So they're telling you what the plans are for the future there. The company said they plan to run a larger study to confirm the combination's safety and efficacy next year. Positive results of that study could clear the way for potential regulatory approval of Moderna's experimental cancer vaccine. Now, the next quote here is important. Moderna and Merck also plan to test the combination in other types of cancer, so they're not limiting this to skin cancer. We don't want to waste time. Remember, it's urgent, Rick. Got to do it now. Given the data is so strong. For me, it's a COVID-like moment. And that came from Moderna Chief Executive Stefan Bancel. Moderna has been eyeing new uses for its mRNA technology since it was validated with the company's widely used COVID-19 vaccine. And researchers have long probed giving vaccines to patients with cancer, one of the pharmaceutical industry's biggest markets. That's another key part.
Yeah, the COVID-like moment for the CEO is the profits.
Yes, and the market availability.
The billions of dollars that they're going to make with this next messenger RNA vaccine.
The article went on to say that the Cambridge, Massachusetts company starts with a biopsy of the patient's tumor. Then it analyzes the tumor sample and identifies mutations in the cancer cells known as neoepitopes. The Moderna selects up to 34 of these that it believes would elicit the strongest immune response from a patient and incorporates the genetic codes for these particular neoepitopes into a vaccine. And once injected into a patient, the vaccine instructs the patient cells to make these.
There you go. There it is, Doc.
Yes.
There it is right there.
It's telling you what the vaccine, what they call a vaccine, is doing.
Once the operating system is injected into the human patient, the operating system instructs the human patient's cells. Instructions are being sent to your cells from a laboratory-made genetic operating system. you have become a cyborg. They're doing it now, Doc. They're creating cyborgs now. We're transitioning. Transhumanism is taking place right now.
It really is.
This is transhumanism. They are transitioning humans to merge with this is synthetic biology, man-made biology. They're creating synthetic computer operating systems to be injected in human beings. This is transhumanism. And everybody who's been vaccinated with a messenger RNA has already made the first step into transhumanism.
Right. And now we have people that have had up to their 5th dose of the COVID operating system. Well, with the current situation going on here in the state of Florida regarding the investigation into the so-called COVID vaccines, it's definitely going to impact how we move forward here in politics because, of course, Governor Ron DeSantis' name has been tossed around as a potential candidate, but there is one other person here in Florida, Rick, that might have something else to say about that. It's Donald Trump, right?
Obviously, he's going to be, well, it appeared up until, I think, recent weeks that he would be the leading presidential candidate in the Republican Party. But there's been a change. And again, I can feel it. It's one of those weather vane moments where you just know the wind has changed.
Right.
And you can't really describe it other than to say, I can sense it. The atmosphere is different. In the aftermath of the midterm elections, we haven't really talked about this because the Republicans should have won the midterms.
If we follow historical trends.
Yes, they should have had a massive victory. They should have picked up 40 to 60 seats in the House, 3 to 5, maybe even 7 seats in the Senate. It didn't happen. So you have to be convinced that the American people decided, man, we really like inflation. We like a corrupt governor who is also senile and has some pedophilia inclinations. We really like high prices, high gasoline prices, high food prices. This is, we like empty store shelves. This is wonderful, and we want to vote for more of it. You have to convince yourself.
More inflation, more recession.
So that's not logical. Your mind knows that didn't happen.
And yet
that's what the people voted for. The other option is the election was rigged again, just like 2020. Nobody wants to talk about it because they're now afraid to say election fraud because that makes you what?
An election denier. And you don't want to be called an election denier. They don't invite you to parties or they don't honor your discount cards.
You could be investigated by law enforcement for being an election denier.
Yes, in certain areas of the country, yes.
All right. The other option to explain it is that Donald Trump had a very substantial influence on the Republicans who were nominated in the primaries throughout 2022. And that many of the Republican candidates were endorsed by Donald Trump. And they defeated, the mainstream Republican conservative candidates.
Right.
Okay. They were strong in the primaries, but very weak in the general elections. And we know that the Democrats were donating to the Trump Republicans.
Yes.
Why would
all over the country.
Why would the Democrats donate to the Trump Republicans? Because they were hoping the Trump Republicans would win the primaries
And poison the well for the general.
and then turn around and then attack them as being Trumpers. Now, that theory may be the reason the Republicans did so poorly in the midterm elections in comparison to what they should have. They squeaked a narrow majority in the House. They did not take control of the Senate. So if that theory is correct, that Donald Trump's endorsement is victory in the primary, but the kiss of death in November.
Which it's hard to wrap your mind around that. But people do tend in general elections to move toward the center.
Yes.
And for a lot of what we call the Trump Republicans, they didn't move toward the center. They stayed right where they were.
Right.
Which, it just following general trends. But there's more to it than that, I think. It's a psychology.
But the news
of it.
media and the social media, Doc, was they were going after the Trump-endorsed candidates. Carrie Lake, who was one of the best candidates who's ever run for governor of Arizona. They branded her an election denier. All right. They put all these labels on people, and they were smearing them throughout the campaign. You couldn't read an article about Carrie Lake that did not include in the article some type of derogatory comment about her, and yet she was an excellent candidate. The bottom line is the news media teamed up with the Democrats once again, and butchered the Trump-endorsed candidates. Well, where am I going with this? There's been a change.
And it's been within the past 2 weeks.
Yes, there's been a change in the political climate. There's a mindset among a lot of Republicans. We like Donald Trump, but we don't want Donald Trump again.
Right.
There's too much toxicity. There's too much baggage. The raid on his home, Mar-a-Lago, it hurt him a lot. That hurt him greatly. At first, I think a lot of us thought that's actually going to help him. People are going to get angry. They're going to get mad. But it's actually, I think, the reverse. People were saying, "Well, did he have classified documents there?"
It put the question in people's minds.
Yes, they don't know. And I think there's Trump burnout. It's just burnout. Like they don't want another, you'd have 6 years, 2 years to 2024, and then 4 years to, they don't want another 6 years of this constant fighting. And it's because the people who hate Trump will never give up.
Right.
Okay? But that means there will be one scandal after another involving Trump. And I think his supporters are saying, he's just too expensive to maintain a relationship with him. It's emotionally too expensive to be devoted to Donald Trump. You will be burned out, and if you get too close to him, you will be burned. Because if you get too close to him, the fire gets on you. And I think that in the last couple of weeks, that's what's happened. And just normal Republican voters are saying, let's find somebody else.
Do you think the dinner at Mar-a-Lago here a couple weeks ago finally pushed a lot of...
That was it.
So...
Yeah. And I personally, again, I think he was set up, but he fell for it. That's the problem.
Right.
See, this is the Trump problem.
It is.
He keeps getting himself in trouble.
During the administration, he was surrounding himself with people who were actually fighting against him.
Yes. And not appointing the people who supported him.
Right.
Or burning them, who were helping him, and then he'd turn on them. So I think people are tired of it, and they're burned out. But people were burned out with Joe Biden, too.
That's right.
They don't want Joe Biden for another 4 years.
I mean, even Democrats are tired of Joe Biden.
That's right. So the Republicans are tired of Donald Trump, and the Democrats are tired of Biden, which means there is a demand for fresh faces in 2024. And we're seeing it in this poll.
Right.
This is New York Post, and it says Republican support for Trump 2024 run collapsing.
And so GOP backing for former President Donald Trump's third consecutive White House bid seems to have fallen apart over the past several months, with most Republican voters saying they'd prefer another candidate to carry on his policies in 2024. And this is according to a poll released today. While 31% of Republican and Republican-leaning independents want Trump to run again in 2 years, 61% say they would rather have another GOP standard bearer. And that was a survey by the USA Today Suffolk University. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis seems to be their preferred choice. So Governor DeSantis, who cruised to re-election in November, leads Mr. Trump by 23 percentage points in a head-to-head primary matchup, the poll shows. Nearly two-thirds of Republican and GOP-leaning voters say the governor should run for the White House in 2024, with just 24% saying he shouldn't.
Now, Doc, those numbers were the opposite before the midterm elections.
So something definitely changed.
The polls were showing overwhelming support in the Republican Party for Donald Trump over Ron DeSantis.
Right.
But something happened after the midterm elections, and if there was a collective mindset that formed in the minds of Republican voters, we should have won that election, and we didn't. And the reason that we didn't win is because the candidates who lost were the Trump-endorsed candidates. The Republicans who won were mainly the mainstream, average Republican candidates. But the ones that went down in flaming defeat were the Trump candidates. And then there was one state that did not happen, Florida. And in Florida, Ron DeSantis cleaned the Democrats' clock all the way down to Miami-Dade.
Yes.
He carried one of the most Democrat counties in Florida. And there's not a Democrat elected statewide in Florida right now. Praise God.
Yes.
We're free of statewide Democrats in this state. It was this DeSantis landslide here, along with Senator Rubio. And so I think voters looked at Florida and said, wait a minute, DeSantis won big. It was a landslide for DeSantis. And Republicans were swept in all across Florida. And now they're looking at going, well, do we want the Trump team or do we want the DeSantis team?
Well, and DeSantis came in based on following the same policies as Donald Trump, but without being Donald Trump. And in this last quote from the New York Post there, Republicans and conservative independents increasingly want Trumpism without Trump.
There it is.
That's from David Paleologos, director of the Suffolk University Political Research Center, speaking to USA Today.
Okay, so Doc, we go back to the main story of the day, the vaccines, the COVID operating systems. Mr. Trump owns those vaccines.
Yes, he has been called the father.
He said he one time said they should be called the Trumpscenes.
Yes.
He was that arrogant. He said they should be called the Trumpscenes. And he's become angry and belligerent when his supporters have questioned him about the vaccines. And he will not back down on it.
Well, he can't. He can't back down on it, can he? What way out is there for him on the vaccines?
You humble yourself and you go, you know what? I got fooled. And I apologize. I believed what they told. Hey, blame it on Fauci. Hey, Fauci told me they were good vaccines.
But even when he's questioned on that, I saw a recent interview where they asked him, do you think that maybe you were misled by those in your administration? And he would say, no, I trusted them to make the right decisions. We made the right decision. We implemented the vaccine. Okay. He doubles down on it.
That's right. So he doesn't realize that probably half of his base rejects the vaccines.
Right.
He doesn't get that part. Ron DeSantis does. So in a primary case, let's say 2024 is Trump versus DeSantis.
Okay.
And we get to the issue of the vaccines in a debate.
Which we will at some point.
That's right. So Trump is going to be defending Moderna and Pfizer, and DeSantis is going to be saying, this stuff killed people, and you're responsible. You know what that debate's going to look like? If the grand jury finds criminal activity, Donald Trump owns it.
That's right. If there were steps that were not taken, anything at all.
Because he pushed it, Operation Warp Speed. And so the pharmaceutical companies are going to say, the only reason we rushed it to market is because President Trump pressured us to do it.
And they could say that too.
Yes.
Because it was a full court press to get those vaccines out.
That's right. What excuse would you use if you were in their shoes? You'd say, the president and his little elf. They're the ones who told us to do it. They ordered us to do it. They paid us to do it. We got bonuses to rush it.
That's right.
And they said, don't worry, we'll give you immunity.
And we'll seal the records for decades,
right,
where no one can see, all the decisions that were made.
That's another. Can the state grand jury get those records?
That's a great question.
Who sealed them? Who sealed the records? I don't know. Which agency sealed the records?
That's a great question.
CDC?
We'll find that out.
Did the CDC do it? Did Health and Human Services do it? But can a grand jury appointed by the state Supreme Court of Florida obtain those records with a subpoena? And what's the argument that a federal agency is going to use to tell a state Supreme Court grand jury, we are not going to honor that subpoena?
It's the FDA.
So the FDA did it.
The Food and Drug Administration. And in Governor DeSantis's petition, he mentions the Food and Drug Administration in his petition as well as one of the possible targets for the investigation, at least here in the state of Florida.
Hey, some more politics. We talked about Kari Lake, and the November Arizona governorship race is still being contested.
Yes.
And
because there were so many irregularities.
And this is why the media tagged her election denier, because they knew that the Democrats were going to cheat again. So we're going to pre-name you. We're going to pre-label you.
Right.
Because you're going to question the election. So we're going to tag you as an election denier because we plan to rob this election. And when you start questioning it, a lot of people are going to say, oh, she's an election denier.
Right.
So what happened? Yeah, so go ahead, Doc.
I was just going to say, Kari Lake is filing a lawsuit against Hobbs and other Maricopa County election officials, naming them by name in this lawsuit. Kari Lake filed a lawsuit this past Friday against Katie Hobbs and the winner of the election and other Maricopa County election officials Friday afternoon. Now, in the lawsuit, Ms. Lake claims that hundreds of thousands of illegal ballots infected the election in Maricopa County, and between 15,000 and 29,000 Republican voters were disenfranchised as a result of tabulator or printer failures experienced at polling locations on election day. Now, Ms. Lake says many of the illegal ballots come in the form of mail-in ballots that were counted despite the fact that envelope signatures did not match signatures on record. As a solution, Lake asked the court to allow an opportunity to inspect Maricopa County ballots from the 2022 election, including signature envelopes and corresponding signatures on file with Maricopa County. Now, additionally, she wants an order vacating the certified results of the 2022 Arizona gubernatorial election and an injunction requiring that Maricopa County reconduct the gubernatorial election. Can you imagine that happening, Rick?
Well, Doc, she filed that lawsuit last Friday.
Right.
So, you know, my initial response, my reaction was, it won't go anywhere. This is a repeat of 2020 when Republicans alleged voter fraud.
And in 2016, when it was the Democrats alleging voter fraud.
That's right.
So,
but here's what happened. I'll put this up. This is number 23. Put this up on the screen. This happened today.
she filed the lawsuit.
Okay. Well, there's the lawsuit. But what happened today is a state judge, and I don't think we have the article here. I thought we had it. A state judge, or I don't know if state or Maricopa County, convened a special hearing and ordered Katie Hobbs and Carrie Lake to appear before the judge. That happened today. There was an emergency session of the court. So there is a judge that's taking this very seriously, Doc. So there's something in the allegation that an Arizona judge said, we can't ignore this.
Right. Judge overseeing Republican Arizona gubernatorial candidate Carrie Lake's electoral lawsuit ordered Lake, Secretary of State, and Arizona Governor-elect Katie Hobbs and others to appear at a court hearing today. So that's likely going on today. Judge Peter Thompson issued the order.
Yeah.
And so they're taking it seriously.
So something could happen. And another story that just surfaced, out of the blue this week, remember Seth Rich?
Yes.
The Democratic National Committee employee who got murdered outside of his home.
Robbed and murdered, but
they didn't steal anything.
Right.
Just his blood. July of 2016. And if you said there was something suspicious about it, you were a conspiracy theorist.
And if you questioned whether or not all the evidence and all the information had been released, once again, you were accused of, conspiracy theories and everything else. Well, we have this story from Epic Times here. FBI reveals it has more information on deceased DNC staffer Seth Rich.
Well, this is the first time, Doc, in how many years? Since 2016, suddenly the FBI admits it has some documents that they've not talked about before.
And there's another laptop involved.
How about that?
So listen to this. The FBI not only has possession of a laptop computer owned by slain Democratic National Committee staffer Seth Rich, but a report detailing forensic imaging of what's being described as Rich's work computer, the Bureau revealed in a new filing. Rick, up to this story, have you ever heard about Seth Rich's laptop?
No.
So where are they keeping all these laptops? Where are they keeping the Weiner laptop, now the Seth Rich laptop, and the Hunter Biden laptops? Is there a special drawer at the FBI in D.C. where they keep all these laptops and stuff?
Yes, and Hillary Clinton's electronic devices are there also. So they keep them in places where nobody will ever get to them.
So the story in Epic Times goes on to say that the FBI's records office located the report, it's just been missing for years, I guess, Rick, while searching for the work computer. Mike Seidel, chief of the office, said in a sworn declaration filed with the federal court in Texas on December 9th. He described the document as a 3-page forensic report detailing the actions performed by an outside entity to image the work laptop. The report was among 4 documents that had never been disclosed by the FBI in relation to Rich's case. So journalist Cy Hirsch said in or around 2017 that he was told by a source about an FBI report on Seth Rich. He said, according to the source, that Seth Rich's computer showed the DNC staffer had relayed DNC documents to WikiLeaks. And Hirsch talked about the source's claims during a phone call with Ed Butowski, an investor who later retracted claims about Rich being a WikiLeaks source, and discussed the call during a deposition. So if you go back to that period of time, all right, so in 2016, we're ramping up toward the general election showdown between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. This DNC staffer, I think it was in July, is, quote, robbed, even though nothing's taken, robbed and killed. And But to this day, we've never heard about a laptop. We
Okay,
haven't heard of,
he was shot to death in a robbery that resulted in no theft.
yes.
So it's not a robbery, is it?
No, it's not.
just a
But
murder.
that's
It's just a murder.
right.
So, but see how they pop a word in, robbery? They deliberately put robbery into the article to confuse your mind.
Right.
No, there was nothing taken. Therefore, there was no robbery.
Now, back when we were talking about this, that we talked about the possibility of whatever information that Mr. Rich had, maybe WikiLeaks had it. And maybe that's why the U.S. wants Julian Assange so bad. Julian Assange, the head of WikiLeaks, has suggested that Rich passed DNC files to the group, which released the DNC files in 2016. Now, U.S. authorities have alleged that those pesky Russians, hacked into the DNC systems, but those allegations were made before the FBI received images from the DNC server to determine their validity.
We got to hold it right there. Federal authorities alleged that Russians hacked the Democratic National Committee systems.
Remember that story?
Yes, but they're still pushing it.
Yes.
The line's still showing up in news articles today, and everybody knows it was a hoax.
Yes.
Everybody, but they still insert that line. But the other line that was in there, put that back up on the screen, because there's one more line there. But those allegations were made before the FBI received images from the DNC server to determine their validity. You know what that means, Doc?
That the FBI had access to the DNC server.
No. It means the opposite. Go back and look at it. I want to show you. Before the FBI received images
from the DNC servers.
The Democratic National Committee never allowed the FBI to see its servers. They said, we're going to send you some pictures.
That's right. They didn't allow access.
They sent them
my gosh.
photographs, screenshots.
Digital versions of that.
Hey, this is just as real as Obama's birth certificate. You know why they couldn't show the FBI the servers? Because the FBI would have to fly to Ukraine.
That's right. Well, now the new records, these brand new records were found after the records office contacted an unnamed FBI special agent during its search for Rich's work computer. And that's according to FBI records chief Seidel. The other records are a letter from a third party that accompanied the work computer and 2 FBI chain of custody forms. None of the records were indexed to Rich inside of the Bureau's central record system, and neither the forensic report nor the custody forms mention Rich's name, according to the FBI. So think about what they just said there, Rick. They had the information, but they didn't have it associated with Seth Rich's name. They had the computer, but they didn't have it associated with Seth Rich's name. They were also not included in an electronic file created for Rich's case.
All deliberate actions.
Right. So the agent claimed that disclosure of the records would harm an FBI investigation into the allegations that Russia had hacked into the U.S. systems. And so basically they used that in order to disassociate it and say, hey, the Russians hacked the election here.
Do you remember years ago, 2016, when we, TruNews released the authentic audio recording of John McCain as a POW broadcasting on North Vietnamese communist shortwave radio, a pro-communist message,
right,
directed to the American veterans, or the American soldiers serving in the Vietnam War. Right. TruNews did that. We released the audio. Do you know where it was found? Now, we're not the ones who found it. A whistleblower provided it to us. But do you know where the audio was found? It was in the Library of Congress, and it had been misfiled in a wrong folder since the 1960s. Just by accident, Doc. This is the way they operate. They don't destroy it.
No, they just mislabel it and put it somewhere else. But they know where it is.
They know where to find it.
So,
but
now,
if they ever get caught at it, oh, you were looking for that? We've been looking for it too. We forgot to label it. Well, here it is.
And not only forgot to label the files, but also the work computer and the investigation about it. Now, one more line out of that article there. The FBI now wants the court to agree to keep the new record shielded from Brian Huddleston, a Texas resident who filed a lawsuit against the Bureau over its ignoring a Freedom of Information request for records on Seth Rich.
If it was just a sloppy robbery that went wrong, why is the FBI covering up these things?
Well, and that's the question. Why is the FBI even involved in the story?
This is a local,
right.
A local crime, isn't it?
And initially, the U.S. Capitol Police were involved. Remember in the story? Mm-hmm. At first, it was D.C. Metro, and then somehow the U.S. Capitol Police got involved, and then it went to the FBI. It was that escalation of, law enforcement.
What would be the Capitol Police? He didn't work for a congressman.
That's right. That was he was a DNC staffer, mm-hmm. or was he more? And so that's the question we ask. But I still want to answer your question, what drawer at the FBI they're keeping all the laptops in?
Oh, but there's a lot of them there, Doc. Hey, Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested last night in the Bahamas. And look what this is according to Daily Mail, claims he's a victim of anti-Semitism.
Nope.
Hey, if all else fails, you just got to reach down in the bag and grab the old anti-Semitism accusation and try to scare people off.
Oh, is he Jewish?
Yes, according to the Jerusalem Post, they had an article entitled "The Jewish King of Crypto." Wow. I think it was "The Jewish Crypto King" was the title of the headline. So they were quite proud of him. But he was arrested, and what's interesting, Doc, is he was scheduled to testify today.
Right.
Before
the House.
Maxine Waters'
mm-hmm.
Committee. There's suspicion there are questions about why was he arrested last night?
Right.
And people are asking the question, was it done to prevent him from testifying today? Because in testimony, even though the Republicans don't control the House yet, that's not until January, there's still Republicans on the committee.
Right.
They would have the opportunity to question him. And you know that they were going to ask questions about his mother's involvement raising money for the Democratic Party and the massive amount of money that he raised as dark money for the Democrats. Was the Biden administration and the Democratic National Committee terrified that Sam Bankman-Fried might just
answer a question? Well, and that's the case. Now, they did release a copy of what his testimony was supposed to be. And now, as Rick said, Bankman-Fried was due to give testimony today about his doomed platform before the U.S. House Representatives Committee on Financial Services. Forbes obtained a written copy of the testimony he was expected to give. It started, I would like to start by formally stating under oath I messed up. He used more colorful
Who
words.
talks like this in front of a House committee?
Someone like Sam Bankman-Fried, who knows he's not going to get in trouble. I know that it doesn't mean much to say that I'm sorry, and so I'm dedicating as much of myself as I can to do the right thing by my customers. But over the next 18 pages, he blamed anti-Semitism, lawyers, and even his own ex-girlfriend for the breakdown of his company. He maintains that his business, at least the American branch of it, is still solvent. He said in the written testimony, to the best of my knowledge, FTX US has been and remains solvent and could pay all of its customers in full tomorrow. Unfortunately, the Chapter 11 team has frozen the FTX US exchange, blocking customers access to their account information.
Well, if his company's solvent, then he can get the $35 billion back.
Yeah, but now it's locked under Chapter 11.
But the $35 billion isn't in FTX.
It's not,
It
no.
went to Alameda. And Alameda doesn't know what happened to the money. He's lost it, Doc. $35 billion. They just lost it. Only the Pentagon can do that kind of stuff. How do you lose $35 billion?
And yet the IRS is coming after you for $600.
Yeah. I know you, Doc. If you lost $35, you'd be turning everything upside down.
I would be.
Looking for $35. He lost $35 billion.
And it doesn't seem to bother him
Doesn't
at all.
bother him at all. He's down in the Bahamas having a great time, living in a villa that he bought with stolen money, donated money, millions, tens of millions of dollars to Democrats with stolen money. The midterm elections were financed. He was the biggest donor. Biggest donor in the midterm elections. It was financed with stolen money. Stolen votes, stolen money. You know what? The Democrats are crooks. They're thieves. It's a criminal cabal.
And then to cry anti-Semitism.
Oh, of course. You got to go for it, you know? You know, that's the first thing you do. But he's little Bernie Madoff.
I lost all this money because people hate me because I'm Jewish.
Yes.
That's an excuse.
That's his argument.
Or my ex-girlfriend put a lot of stress on me. I mean, that $35 billion, your ex-girlfriend caused you that much stress.
Hey, we got a story from oilprice.com.
This
China,
is big.
Yes, it is. China looks to expand use of yuan in energy deals.
Right, and so it looks like the meeting between Xi Jinping last week and the Saudis is paying off. As part of China's ongoing drive to bolster its position in the Middle East, Chinese President Xi Jinping has pledged to increase development aid to the region and has ramped up efforts to promote the use of the Chinese yuan in energy markets. Speaking at the just concluded China Arab States Summit and the China Gulf Cooperation Council, a summit in Riyadh, Xi Jinping said that China and Gulf nations should make full use of the Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange as a platform to carry out yuan settlement of oil and gas trades. Now that's the first direct challenge that we now have
Yes.
to the petrodollar, right
There it is. There it is, Doc. The deals are going to be done in the Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange.
Right, and so they've got the platform already set up. Goes on to say in the article, China will continue to import large quantities of crude oil from GCC countries, expand imports of liquefied natural gas, strengthen cooperation in upstream oil and gas development, engineering services, storage, transportation and refining, and make full use of the Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange as a platform to carry out yuan settlement of oil and gas trade, he said.
So, Doc, my guess is that Saudi Arabia will begin next year in 2023 doing limited trades at the Shanghai Exchange. What that means is they have violated the petrodollar deal that Henry Kissinger made with Saudi Arabia in 1973. Because the deal was all oil trades done in U.S. petrodollars. I think they'll start, they're not going to dump the dollar suddenly, but I think they're going to start doing some trades in Chinese yuan, some trades in dollar. But it will be a massive crack in the petrodollar. Once it starts, there's no going back to the petrodollar. And I think you're going to see throughout 2023 an increase in the amount of oil and gas transactions at the Shanghai Exchange.
And really the U.S. can't do anything about it, can they?
Can't do anything about it unless they want to blow up Saudi Arabia. I mean, would Biden go that far? Would he assassinate Saudi leaders? How far would he go to enforce that trade?
Well, we'd have to basically quit financing the Saudi military too, because we do.
Yes, right.
They would have no military without the U.S.
Right.
But that's part of, I think, last week
But if he did
too.
it, the Chinese would step in immediately.
Right, and I think that was part of the conversation last week as well when the Chinese president was visiting Saudi Arabia. That conversation took place.
Look at this next article from CNN. This just came out this afternoon. An exclusive article by CNN, U.S. finalizing plans to send U.S. Patriot missile defense systems to Ukraine.
I just don't know how crazy these people are getting, Rick. The Biden administration is finalizing plans. That means they've worked it all out.
The deal's done.
Right. They're finalizing plans to send the Patriot missile defense system to Ukraine. That could be announced as soon as this week, and that's according to 2 U.S. officials and a senior administration official. The Pentagon's plan still needs to be approved by Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, so that's the first step, and before it's sent to President Joe Biden for his signature. These 3 officials told CNN that approval is expected. Now, it's not clear how many missile launchers will be sent, but a typical Patriot battery includes a radar set that detects and tracks targets, computers, power generating equipment, engagement control station, up to 8 launchers, each holding 4 ready-to-fire missiles. Now, once the plans are finalized, the Patriots are expected to ship quickly in the coming days, and Ukrainians will be trained to use them at a U.S. Army base in Grafenwehr, Germany, officials said. So they're going to go, I guess from that particular article, they're going to be going to Germany first and then to Ukraine. So if I'm reading that right.
What were we discussing in the past 2 weeks about German hardware being sent to Poland?
Right, and the question of ownership and everything.
Were
that
they
was going on.
Patriots?
Yes, that was Patriot
Yeah,
missiles.
they were Patriots. So what's happened, Doc, is they're not going to have German Patriots sent to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
The Germans got cold, pardon the pun, they got cold feet, and they said, we're only going to send them as far as the Polish border.
Right.
And Biden said, we'll send them all the way into Ukraine. How do they get them into Ukraine? Are they going to drop them in by parachutes? How do they get the Patriots into Ukraine? Will U.S. military cargo planes fly them into Ukraine? The moment they do, they're a target.
Yes. If they ship it by rail, by road, by plane.
They're a target.
They're a target. And this is what's really crazy about this, for them to come out and just say, we're doing this, when Russia has said specifically, this is a red line for us. You have to understand, if Patriot missiles show up here, we're done talking.
So if C-130s are flying into Kiev with these Patriot missiles on them, are the C-130s a military target?
I would think absolutely they would be.
So if Russia blows up U.S. Air Force C-130s?
In an unprovoked attack?
Yeah. What do we have?
World War III.
And when are they sending them?
Well, they're making they're closing the deal this week.
Yes.
And they've got to train the Ukrainians in Germany. So I don't know the timeline there, how quickly we're looking at it actually being shipped. But the deal is being finalized this week, apparently by Lloyd Austin, the president.
Once the plans are finalized, the Patriots are expected to ship quickly in the coming days.
Right. And and Ukrainians will train to use them at a U.S. Army base.
Yes, but
in Germany.
they're not shipping the Patriots to Germany.
That's right, because they don't have to ship it to Germany.
They're
they could have
shipping
already
the
been
Patriots
trained.
to Ukraine, and they're going to take the Ukrainian soldiers to Germany.
Which they are probably already there,
Right.
being trained.
So what that says, Doc, is these Patriots are going to Ukraine in the next week or two.
Oh, wow.
Just in time for Christmas.
Well, Merry Christmas out there.
We're not out of the woods yet regarding a nuclear war by Christmas. We are not out of the woods. There's still the danger of a nuclear war by Christmas. This just upped the risk level enormously. We need to be concerned about it. One more final story before we wrap it up. Air Force Times reporting a B-2 stealth bomber damaged in Missouri during an emergency landing.
I don't know if you've ever seen a B-2 fly over, Rick.
No, I haven't.
These things, they're so foreboding, and they scare the daylights out of them. They're loud. I mean, you understand how they could strike fear and terror. So to hear a B-2 going off the runway or having any kind of problems. A B-2 stealth bomber suffered damage Saturday when an in-flight malfunction forced the crew to make an emergency landing in Missouri. Firefighters at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri extinguished a fire at the scene. Staff Sergeant Alexandria Lee, a spokesperson for the 509th Bomb Wing, said Monday. No one was hurt and an investigation is ongoing. But they're further in the article there, they said this was the third incident with B-2
B-2s,
bombers
yeah.
that have occurred over the past few months. Now, couple this with the big presentation. I only saw the reveal of the new Raider, stealth Raider.
No.
Yeah, this is going to be the replacement for the B-2, the next generation. Lloyd Austin had a big presentation, everything. It was just weird that this story came out this week as they're making this big presentation on the stealth Raiders that are going out. And that makes the B-2 look like, the junior varsity team.
So we don't know if the B-2 was armed with a nuclear warhead when it had an emergency landing in Missouri.
No, and would they tell you? If
No,
they
they're
would?
not going to tell you.
So, Whiteman Air Force Base is where we have a lot of the B-2s, and it's not unusual. When I was in National Guard, they would take us on tours of, the B-2 facility and everything, and there were 15 of them lined up on the runway. I mean, it does give you a sense of, man, we can blow up anything. And you can fly from, basically from Sedalia, Missouri, where Whiteman is, all the way to Japan and back in a B-2.
When I was a kid, grew up in Western Maryland, the A-10 Warthogs were made at Fairchild. And my home was in the flight path of the Warthogs. And so the highlight of my day was to get home from school and get in position for warthogs to come across the house. They would come screeching through the sky. They were awesome. They were absolutely awesome to see those machines flying. They were flying low altitude, and they'd come flying across the farm fields from the Fairchild aircraft factory. But that's many, many years ago. But I know that feeling when a warplane comes flying at low altitude over you, the fear that it puts in a person. So I can imagine a B-2, because I've never seen one in real life.
Oh, that's scary. But you know what? The B-2, though, is an aging aircraft itself. And really, this story kind of hints at, it doesn't say it in the article so much, but it does cause you to think, really, the U.S. military is an aging fleet of vehicles. We haven't updated our helicopters in decades. The Blackhawks and the Apaches and everything else we're using, that's 70s and 80s technology that we're using for those. And that's still the bulk of our aircraft. There was an announcement this week, a new defense award for, we're going to get new helicopters. They're not going to be available until 2030. So we're still going to be using that. And on the new Stealth Raider that Lloyd Austin was presenting, it won't be out till 2032. I mean, so we're still years out. We're almost a decade out from an update of our own military. Meanwhile, China, Russia, they're building now.
And Mr. Medvedev said yesterday, hey, we have stepped. Be careful there, Doc. You almost your chair leaned back. I thought we have a dramatic ending of the program today. What did I say that shocked you so much? Mr. Borrell,
Medvedev.
No, Borrell in the European Union. He said today that the European nations have depleted their arsenal. It's all been sent to Ukraine. They're empty. Their storehouses are empty.
He said that out loud.
He said it out loud.
Meanwhile, in Russia, they're going, we just have to wait.
Medvedev said yesterday, we're stepping up production of new weapons. We're increasing the production. And the Europeans are saying, our armories are empty. It's all been sent to Ukraine. And yet you have Zelensky saying, hey, I'm not negotiating. We're going to keep this war going.
By the way, keep sending the ammo.
Send us more ammo, send us more money, and I want that book deal and that movie deal. Did you see Fetterman got a movie deal?
Yes, I saw that. Did you see?
And the New York Times voted him one of the best dressed men in America.
I know. I saw that the other day.
This is satire, right?
No, it was actually, they said that Fetterman, You know, the guy who wears a hoodie all the time to hide a lump basically is one of the best dressed men in America. Doggone it, all I have to do now is come out here in a hoodie from now on.
No, Doc, it's part of the mind games.
It is.
They want your mouth to say something your head and your heart knows is not true. It's gaslighting. They're constantly gaslighting. Okay, we are going to turn out the lights here and go home. We'll be back here tomorrow, God willing, and we'll give you another dose of True News. As always, we appreciate those of you who pray for us, intercede for us, and support us financially. We're in the closing weeks of 2022, and if it's possible that you can get a financial gift to True News, we would be very grateful to receive it by the end of the month. It means a lot to us to finish out the year with every bill paid and a little bit in the bank so that we can go into the next year with some fuel in the tank. And so when everybody does something, it all comes together. So don't ever think that your gift is too small. Don't ever think, I can only send $5. That $5 means a lot, because when a lot of people do it, it adds up. If you can send 50, if you can send 100, if you can send 5,000, whatever is doable for you, we ask that you support us and show your appreciation. We were here every day for a year. We were faithful and we were consistent. We didn't let you down. We were here. And now we ask at the end of the year that you show appreciation with a financial gift. The address is on the screen, Post Office Box 690069, Vero Beach, Florida 32969. I have to say it every once in a while because I forget that there are substantial numbers of people who do not watch True News, but they listen to True News.
That's true.
We have a large audio audience, and I forget that you're not seeing the address. We have the address on the screen. That's why we don't talk about it. But I forget about it, that there are a lot of people who just listen. How do I know? Because a couple months ago, there was a gentleman here, a local Vero Beach resident,
yes, I remember this,
who was here on a service call.
Right.
And for a company he worked for, and he's here in the building, and all of a sudden realizes this is True News, and he goes, True News? I listened to True News.
Yes.
I didn't know you were in Vero Beach. It's because we don't say the address. So he had been listening for a long time and never heard us give the address. So for those of you who listen by audio, the address is Post Office Box 690069, Vero Beach, Florida. The zip is 32969. And you can donate online at the website, TruNews.com, or on the True News app. And there is a phone number right there, 800-576-2116. And somebody will enter that phone any time of the day, 7 days a week. Please, do something in the remaining days of December. It will mean a lot to us. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow.
God bless you.